Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, I'm excited to present to you the exhibition, The Ukrainian Shtetl, Homecoming to Places of Strength, Photographic Travels in Former Jewish Localities. Let me start by expressing my gratitude to the Center for Jewish Studies at Fordham University and personally Professor Magda Teter for organizing this exhibition and supporting Ukrainian Jewish scholars. In the exhibition, you will see selected photographs that represent a large collection of materials that I gathered over more than 20 years of my travels through the former Jewish towns of Ukraine. For me, this is not only nostalgia, but also a kind of exploration of my existential experience, aiming to understand our Jewish past through visual images and connect it with the present and future. Today, this connection is under the gun of Russian missiles, and the current war shows the fragility and defenselessness of this cultural layer. I dedicate this exhibition to the blessed memory of my relatives who perished in the Holocaust in Kamensk-Podilsky in August of 1941. May their souls be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Yiddishland, from vanishing to discover. The traditional world of Jewish settlements, established in our memory as a civilization of the Shtetl, has been slowly disappearing since the beginning of the last century. Images captured in the drawing of artists, texts, and the photographs of travelers and explorers consistently record their decline. Everyone who entered the Shtetl could they were the last. Photographs by Solomon Yudovin, Alois Breyer, Danilo Щербаківський, Pavlo Zhaltovsky, Genrikh Poddemsky, Alter Kaczyzny, and Roman Vishniak captured ethnographic and everyday perspectives of this distinctive Jewish world from a range of angles. Meanwhile, this world was inexorably being erased by pogroms, wars, revolutions, modernization, and Sovietization. The multi-material culture of Ukrainian Yiddishland, all synagogues and cemeteries, traditional life, the cheder, Jewish religious primary school, ancient and young alike scurrying through the streets of cramped Jewish neighborhoods, represent for many images that are simultaneously eternal and doomed. The Shtetl is a cradle of European Jewry, its linguistic, social, religious, material, and artistic cultural space. This amazing world lived on for more than 5 centuries. It flowered in many Eastern European countries. Its statehood changed with ever-shifting national borders. It was fenced off by the line of sedentarization known as a Pale of Settlement. It experienced dramatic collisions with wars, pogroms, evictions, and social, political, and economic upheavals, yet always tried to adapt to new ways of life. But its time was measured. The Shtetl was destined to perish in the Holocaust. After the loss of its human inhabitants, stones began to disappear, streets and traces of the past were erased, and memories faded away. The subsequent decades of post-war life in Soviet Ukraine shifted the attention of the already restricted Jews to other goals and values. Concerned with survival and raising children, searching for their place in socialist society, and building a bright future, the gaze of Jews turned away from their past. And the Jewish settlement simply disappeared from the new picture of the world. Friedrich Gorenstein's poetic metaphor, likening the old Berdichev house to a self-built house made of the debris of biblical stones and slabs, very accurately expressed the fate of the settlement in the conflict between Jewish generation. I quote, "By soon the whole of Berdichev will move into furnished rooms, and the biblical rubble will be bulldozed." End quote, from the play Berdichev, 1975. The return to the Shtetl under the decline of the Soviet era and the first years of Ukrainian independence, depicted in the photographic works of Dmitry Pesachov, Rita Ostrovskaya, Mikhail Heifetz, Mikhail Kryger, and others, was closed in the forms of a different poetics: contemplative, lyrical, nostalgic, philosophical, genre, even reportage. The photographs preserved the dilapidated textures of the remaining scenery. In them, the old life is smoldering and the new one is trying to adopt. It was obvious that the physical space of the Shtetl was fading beyond the edge of oblivion. And the world of the place took on a different metaphysical mode. Everyone found in this space, in the world of David Roskes, his useful past, his source of life and strength, his light, vanishing and unquenchable, a light that only black and white film could truly convey. A space of ruins and a place of power. At the turn of the millennium, the light of the Shtetl streamed in as a thin ray from the cobwebbed crevice of a keyhole. Through the efforts of many explorers and expeditions, the old rusty door to this lost world began to open slowly. But it was not easy to see its former glory. For those who have admired ancient ruins or mock ruins of European parks, a fashionable architectural caprice of the 18th and 19th centuries, the ruins of the Shtetl, with the exception of the impressive defensive synagogues, seem unimpressive. The scale of destruction of the long 20th century has hidden from us the former architectural richness of the Shtetls, with the ancient castles, fortress walls, markets, and the low earthen buildings, houses, and inns typical of Jewish settlements. The intricacy of the streets, the picturesque play of light and shadow between old buildings with crumbling limed walls, ruined of synagogues, shattered windows, carved stills of tombstones with bizarre and mysterious symbols. This is what is left of that world. At the same time, there is a special atmosphere and a keenly felt breath of antiquity, a fascinating aesthetic of destruction. Everywhere is the same set of ruins: castles, churches, synagogues, cemeteries, remnants of monumental antiquity, and some ridiculous and impersonal invasions of Soviet times. All of this is somehow composed in a special way and organically integrated into the natural landscape. Up close, you can feel the architectural power and texture of old stone and wood, the intimidating look of empty Gothic windows. But step farther away, and the impressions are magnified. Thoughts of grandeur and frailty are, along with the romantic experiences, slowly absorbed by the melancholic contemplation of the open landscape. As Ukrainian literary critic Ippolit Zborovets noted, this desolation is not a dumping ground for old things, but a world still full of human warmth. And the ruins of this world are also a living substance. A deep Jewish context spiritualizes them. The people of the exile lived in the townships with the expectation of the coming of Mashiach in every generation. That is why the two worlds of the townships, the world of the living, especially the synagogues, and the world of the dead, the cemeteries, are still waiting for this time. Since ancient times, old synagogues have been endowed with mystical power. They were not repaired, but were considered ancient and holy. It was believed that they were not built, but dug up and pulled out of the folds of the rock. In Shmuel Agnon texts, the Beit Midrashim, houses of learning, were literally torn down and marched to the land of Israel with all the books and tables and benches, along with the Jews. The desire to preserve the memory of their small temples in exile manifested itself in the fashion of quoting motifs from old synagogues in modern Israeli buildings, referring us to the images to the famous synagogues in Belz, Vizhnitsa, and Zhovkva. All this is very much in tune with the ideas of Rabbi Maharsha of Krakow with regard to the third Messianic temple, which in the future will unite all the synagogues of the world in itself. The belief in the resurrection of the dead turned cemeteries into giant necropolises where those who had passed to the other side of life waited for their deliverance. Carved tombstones as if testifying before the face of the Almighty to the merits of the deceased begged for their share in the future world. I remember a strong mystical feeling in Satanif when the setting sun suddenly illuminated the western facade of the synagogue and the exquisite carvings of the ancient tombstones on the hill nearby. It was as if Providence itself has directed the holy stones to the east, where the prayers of the living and the aspirations of the deceased would be directed. Although from a religious point of view, the land outside the land of Israel was considered unclean, the righteous and tzaddikim, spiritual leaders of the Hasidic community, transformed its nature, sanctified it, and equalized its status with the historical homeland of the Jews. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav was endowed with the ability to recreate the Holy Land wherever he appeared. The return of the Hasidim from all over the world to dozens of places where the founders of their movement lie is a guarantee that this memory will not fade and that these places of strength will be nourished by prayer and life for a very long time to come. My Shtetl, a world of different roads. This world has also become my place of strength, even though we are now in the 21st century. Fate led me by unpredictable paths to these parts of Western Ukraine from my hometown, Kharkiv, far away in the east. I first saw these former localities as a member of a large group of Jewish artists and art critics in the summer of 2002. Two buses traveled across the vast expanse of Podolia, Volhynia, Galicia, and Bukovina. Here and there, Jewish monuments appeared like fragments of a huge world against the backdrop of the gaping emptiness of urban and rural landscapes. It was as if an invisible tailor was mercilessly cutting out very specific fragments from a colorful blanket. Time has patched up the voids, but it took effort, knowledge, and imagination to fill in the revealed picture. My strongest impression of those times was the gods in Jewish cemeteries. Every time I handed them a bunch of grass, I felt the living breath of history, an inexplicable spiritualistic experience. It seemed that I was touching the leaves of their former owners. 10 years later, I brought 2 expeditions here myself. First, they were my relatives and friends, and later an expedition of young artists and students to show them another, unknown Ukraine. 24 towns and villages in central Ukraine, Volhynia and Podolia, opened many eyes to the space of life and memory of Ukrainian Jews. This world emerged from the many disparate fragments encountered along the way: holy ruins, rivers, hills, residential and cemetery landscapes, toponyms, lonely Jews who still kept the memory of the settlement, rare artifacts in museums, memorial signs at the sites of mass Jewish deaths. Imagination glued the detail into a whole picture. All this made it possible to discover, capture, and glorify the lost culture of the Shtetl in the large project Jewish Atlantis, the world of the Shtetl in the works of Kharkiv artists. Another decade later, in March 2022, we were fleeing from Russian shelling in the early days of the war. Then the world of the Shtetl became a shelter for us. At that time, Russian missiles did not reach the center of Ukraine. But I was possessed by a different mystical feeling of a safe tunnel, a heaven through which the car with my family was rushing under the protection of the great Tzaddikim. It was as if all this had been foreseen, including our overnight stays in the former Jewish settlements of Uman and Medjugorje. I had once come here as an inquisitive explorer and enthusiastic traveler, but now this space hidden from outsiders sheltered us as refugees. I remember the obsession with which I photographed tombstones in the old Medjugorje cemetery, like my predecessors of the distant 1920s. It seems to me that I was standing next to them, but in my own time, to capture this holy place, perhaps in the last days of its existence. Finally, in 2023, the world of the formal settlement returned me to its full living space, albeit reduced, but filled with holiness, prayer, and the modern life of the community. It was a new experience of traveling through the Ukrainian province as a pilgrim together with the Simcha Jewish community of Kiev. Shabbatons, Shabbat seminars, and summer camps are held at the places of life and repose of the founder of Hasidim, Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov. His many disciples and followers, the great tzaddikim Rabbi Israel Friedman of Sadhora, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Hager of Vizhnitsa, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, and Rabbi Shneur Zalman, founder of the Chabad movement, buried in Hadech, have unfolded this space into other horizon of history, living heritage, and a developing pilgrimage infrastructure. As if against oblivion, time began to roll back. At the same time, we are given an opportunity to revive this world, albeit selectively, but nevertheless to restore it, to return its rightful historical territory on the geographical map. Photographic views of the Shtetl. Needless to say, throughout these 2 decades, I had a camera with me, first an analog film camera, then digital, and finally a high-quality smartphone camera. I shot avidly, afraid of missing generalities as much as meaningful details. Some of the shots were important to me for scientific work, but I set aside material for artistic pursuits as well. The feeling that I would be the last to capture this still-vanishing world became obsessive. In my works, I sought to show its concrete and collective image, its grandeur and holiness, its special aura, as well as my place in it and its place in me. I searched for the right format and optics, developed my approach. Suddenly, this pursuit opened up on one of the hills in Shargorod, or perhaps it was Sataniv or elsewhere, when I saw the whole place as if in the palms of my hands, so warm, cozy, hidden. Turning slowly in a circle to take in my surroundings, I found myself in the center of a captivating mise-en-scene. The unfolding horizons gave the name to the eponymous cycle of works, Panoramas of the Jewish World. Almost 20 years ago, within the framework of the first collective exhibition, Homecoming to the Shtetl, Kharkiv 2005, I presented meter-long photo panoramas assembled in Photoshop. At the same time, they were in color. Later, I realized that color seemed superfluous in them. The following project was part of the above-mentioned Jewish Atlantis exhibition, with the addition of an independent photo project on the rivers of Babylon, Kharkiv 2012. It was through the prism of a biblical psalm that I perceived the frozen world of the Shtetl. The psalm's recitative still resound in me on the Babylon's rivers of Ukraine, the Teterев and the Hnilopyat, the Dnieper and the Zbruch, the Smotrich and the Southern Bug, where less than a century ago the Yiddish melody was woven into the rustle of the willows. Weeping on the rivers of Babylon turned into weeping on the ruins of the Shtetl, with its all-consuming grief and nostalgia, contemplation of holy stones, and the memory of my relatives from Kamenets-Podilsky who perished in the Holocaust. In the summer of 2018, the Rivers of Babylon project crossed the Black Sea and the Bosporus on the yacht, heading from Kharkiv to Kherson and on the shores of Haifa. The exhibitions in Haifa, Carmel, and other cities were timed to coincide with the 70th anniversary of the State of Israel, becoming a symbol of the cultural ties of diaspora communities with their historical homeland and the return of Jews to Zion. Looking through old photographs, I felt like I was mentally returning to this black and white world that could only be imagined in color from artists' paintings, but not from photographs. I grabbed onto this style to intentionally free myself from modernity. The black and white photographs, with lightly textured and framed images that resembled prints from old glass photographic plates, referenced the aesthetics of pictorialism. Occasionally, I selectively retained color to enhance the aestheticism of the black and white image. Documentary stylization became my preference. I tried not just to record the subject, but to improve and enrich the picture, to poeticize it by using montages, changing the softness or contrast, or darkening the frame. This game of imitation was to emphasize the authenticity, compositional integrity, and distance of the image. This applied not only to carefully edited panoramas, but also to individual photographs. I can no longer remember the number and names of all the places I saw, only the generalized portraits, brushstrokes, images that flash like people's faces. At a quick glance, I can name a few dozen cities and towns, shots of which I included in the exhibition. Among them are Berdichev, Chernivtsi, Dubno, Hadych, Kamenets-Podilsky, Khust, Kremenets, Uman, Vyzhnitsa, and many others. The number also includes Lviv and I think Kiev, not localities, of course, but the mighty continuation in the west expanse of Yiddishland. Approximately the same number remained unidentified. All of these images were part of several cycles of my existential photographic journeys. One of them, Shtetls contours, was a discovery of the visual typology of the Shtetl through its windows, doors, tombstones, and inhabitants. Silence, panorama of Yiddishland, aesthetics of desolation, asymmetry of time, and faces of localities summarize my heterogeneous photographic material. I tried to capture my observations and emotions to show the timelessness and pulsation of the Shtetl, to comprehend its chronotope. Professor Ippolit Zborovets saw in this a combination of the documentary and the artistic, an attempt to unravel the mysteries of the local houses and courtyards of the past, to open the shutters mentally and hear thousands of stories, to create my own epic and myth of the Shtetl. Time changes the optics. In the current photo colleges, based on recent and old photography, I found it more important to use composite compositions, creating a rhythmically complex narrative canvas, a painting in which the viewer is unfathomably brought inward through the insurmountable. I wanted to take the next step, to enter the inner space of the Shtetl and wander through the invisible labyrinths. In each case, I sought a different path of transcendence, through things, people, space, emptiness, symbol. This penetration allowed me to take something elusive and important from each lost object, each place to return back with insight and spiritual enrichment. In the cycle Shtetl transgression, I subconsciously searched for these channels of communication and in response to the impact from there. Shtetl forever. For 2 decades, I have been tracking the changing life of the Ukrainian province. Away from bustling civilization, time flowed differently here, slowing down and stopping. With each new trip, I rediscovered familiar places, looked for changes, listened to the exciting silence. My thoughts took me deep into the eras when the classic Shtetl breathed its full breath, and when its breath was interrupted. I caught neither, seeing only the fossilized. But even in this space of boundless power of the winds, I continue to feel the current of life and the lightness of my own breath. I am aware that neither I nor the generations to come will be the last witnesses of the Shtetl. Slowly and steadily losing its authentic appearance, this space will reveal itself in a new way to contemporaries and descendants. The technologies of the future are digitalization, virtualization, artificial intelligence will help us to not forget the past. So the world of the Shtetl will always be open to direct or indirect contact. It will always remain a place of deep longing, inexplicable love, and abiding strength. Thank you very much.